The Michigan offense is promising all kinds of things. It's going to get you a bit excited if you believe it. Again, spring disclaimer always counts. But coming out of yet another press conference, there's just a lot to take in. We're going to talk about it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I was your man on the ground, but I've been your man in the car. And we're doing this podcast in the car due to the fact that it took me 2 hours to get to Ann Arbor, and inexplicably it's taking me 2 hours to get back. So anyway, just for the sake of time, we're doing it. Isaiah Hull's my name. So here we are, ready to discuss all things Michigan football. I think that what has been interesting about the spring press conferences has been a mixture of kind of narratives that we get, right? Like you ask about the quarterback situation. It's not all about Bryce, it's like all of them, and eventually that got narrowed down to two. And then today even we had, I think it was Hogan Hansen. It might have been Semaj Morgan. I can't quite remember, saying that, yeah, we're only practicing with the two quarterbacks, Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis. So like you get down to the nitty gritty of it eventually. So that's a part of all of that. But when we talk about, like, for instance, we had Ben Hall today, and in talking to Ben Hall, he said some things that when I was there with him that indicated, yeah, there's some changes when it comes to the way that the offense runs. And, it's more talking about the running backs and how they're expected to be heavily prevalent in the pass game as well. They're the last part of the progression, but they are part of the progression on pass plays at all times. But then after I left him to go to Hogan Hansen, because if you don't know, the way a lot of these work is with the players, they bring out so many players and sometimes they overlap and they say one's available and you leave, just choose to stay with the one you're with or go to the other one. I felt like I got everything I needed or wanted from Benjamin Hall. So I go to Hogan Hansen. But when the people who were with Ben Hall come to Hogan Hansen, they say Ben Hall says that the offense doesn't look very different compared to what it looked like last year. But that flies in the face of what Hogan Hansen had to say, as well as what Semaj Morgan had to say. Hogan Hansen is talking about, it's a lot different. We have there's a lot more passing. There's a lot more schematic differences in terms of how we get guys open, how we get guys the ball, what they're able to do with it. Talking about the tight ends, there's a lot more about what the tight end's role and responsibility is in terms of how they are utilized in the passing game. And he's like, this works out really well for me as a pass catching tight end. Like it's absolutely phenomenal, the types of things that I get to do now, more compared to last year. But then you get that question, how is it any different? And it's like coming from the people who weren't there for the early part, and it's kind of goes back into a shell like, I guess maybe it's not that different. But then you get to Semaj Morgan, who I was excited to get Semaj, because for Semaj, he's a truth teller, man. He's going to tell you how it is, like it is, all of that kind of stuff. And that's precisely what you got with Semaj, was a guy that was coming in to be like, you want to know how it is? I'm going to tell you. That's how he is. So for him to come in and say, it's going to, I can't remember his exact words. This is where being in the car, having been in the car for almost 2 hours, it's a little different for me because I'm not looking at a page in here to tell you exactly what he said. But what Semaj had to say about it was the idea that if you like your traditional Michigan football, you're not going to keep your traditional Michigan football. Apologies for the fact that this is shaking with camera. Kind of can't help it on the road. But he's saying, like, it's not going to be the tradition. There's a lot more passing. Now, when it comes to game plan, we'll see, because it might just be a part of where they're installing certain things, and so you're going to see a lot more of that pass, and then when it comes game day, you're going to see a lot more run. But Semaj even went as far as saying we're in a lot more 11 personnel. So 11 personnel, meaning one running back, one tight end. Michigan is often likes to go in bigger personnel groups. It's tended to be, two tight ends, one running back, two running backs, one tight end, or even in a lot of cases, 2 and 2, 22 personnel. So there's more receivers on the field at the moment. So that in and of itself tells you that they are intending on doing things in a different way. And to hear a bit more about Chip Lindsey and what they think of him in that room, in the wide receiver room in particular, just how it's like, we're being utilized a lot more. There's a lot of things that get us open. There's a lot of things that work better for us. And then Hogan Hansen, talking about the quarterback, says, hey, it's a little bit of both, right? We have quarterbacks that are capable of throwing downfield. Now, that's one of the things that we've heard consistently. Downfield throwing. Whether that's the intermediate, the 10 to 19, that's the deep ball, 20 plus, will remain to be seen. But you combine that with the 70, right? We heard 70-yard bombs are happening a lot more. I think that tells you a lot about what you're going to see there. And then you add in the Benjamin Hall, the idea that the running backs are highly prevalent in the pass game. I mean, I just think that I don't think you're going to see Michigan fully uncork it. And this is where the next segment we'll kind of get into a bit of what some of the feedback I saw when I was leaving Ann Arbor 18 hours ago from the fans about the tradition of it all. But I think that there's a couple different ways that we can look at it, and we're gonna do that here in just a moment. But before we do, this message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Don't let the studio look or sound fool you. Very much. We are in the car still, but I can't read something while I'm driving, especially in stop and go. Going 30 miles an hour on the expressway. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. It's a whole lot of fun. Heck, if it's a lot better than being in a complete standstill. I don't know what is going on 23 and why I'm catching it both ways, but that's where we're at. So I saw some of the feedback, and one of it was my colleague, Zach Shaw, who now lives in Chicago, can't ask these questions in spring ball because he's living it up in the city. But nonetheless, he had said, like, it's a tradition unlike any other, that Michigan's going to air it out more. I think that always is accurate. But he also did have the disclaimer accurately, but they are going to air it out more. Like last year, keep in mind, you saw multiple games where Michigan didn't attempt many passes at all. USC, Alabama, even Ohio State, there, I don't remember the numbers there, but like you saw the second half, like when Alex Orji was in, generally Michigan was not attempting to make a heck of a lot of throws downfield, right? They just, or screens or any of that nature. Saw people say something about Semaj only being involved in 2-yard screens. Listen, I don't think this offensive coordinator is going to do that. If it's only going to net 2 yards, it's not going to be that, right? think more to when the passing game works. Like, even with the Cade McNamara era, you saw more, like, not as many screens, but the end arounds and things of that nature that were effective. I think you're going to see more things like that. But I think the big thing here for when it comes to the passing game is they did not bring in not just Jaden Davis last year. Now, I know, like, they didn't throw the freshman to the Wolves a year ago. And, you know, what if he's more capable and all of that stuff, it's going to certainly cause people to wonder what could have been. But you did not go out and get Bryce Underwood to hand the ball off. That sometimes we see Michigan fans feeding into the rival narratives and calling him a handoff merchant and stuff like that. You didn't bring him in to throw the ball 20 or less times in a game. You brought him to be able to change the ability of the Michigan offense to run. And I understand, I saw another comment talking about that's not how we won a national championship. And that's true. But how many of the players that are going to be on the field this year, offensively, were on the field in the national championship game? As I do a little bit of mental math here, it seems to me that number is 0. So, yes, I mean, you want to keep an identity, and you still want, if you're Michigan, we're going to pass a lot more does not mean that we're only going to run the ball 15 to 20 times a game, and otherwise we're just going to be slinging it all the time. Number one, take a look at Chip Lindsey's track record. It's been all about balance in terms of production, not in terms of equitable passes to runs necessarily. But we've seen a lot of Chip Lindsey offenses, whether it was his time at Auburn or it was his time at UCF, where it was a 3,000-yard passer and a 3,000-yard rusher. Or not, I should say not rusher, passer, but 300 yards passing and then otherwise 3,000 yards rushing. I think that's kind of how you're going to look at it. And what some of the things that Semaj offered was, we're going to be able to pass the ball and then we're just going to run at you. Now, that's a little bit counter to what Grant Newsome had said when he was talking about the idea of the Michigan attack being more, we're going to run at you and then we're going to be able to throw it over your heads. I think it would be better, more so, given that everyone knows Michigan wants to run the ball, that you do it in that backwards way. You do it in that way. I don't know if you can even see my hand. I'm doing things gesture-wise that I don't know if I can be seen or not. But you do it in a way that is more likely to basically put defenses off balance, right? Because you look at 2022. We've talked about this ad nauseum in recent weeks, but the way that Michigan was able to run the ball so effectively was they uncorked J.J. McCarthy early. His first start at Michigan against Hawaii, he throws way downfield, and suddenly every team for the rest of the season is like, we cannot load up the box because that guy can uncork it, and they've got the receivers that can go catch it, and if we load up the box, that's an instant touchdown. We cannot allow that to happen. However, in 2023, for whatever reason, you saw the opposite thing happen. You saw a team say, especially because Blake Corum coming off of an injury, maybe that's why, you saw the opposite effect, where you saw teams say, we dare J.J. McCarthy to throw. And the running game got bottled up, especially comparatively. You look at the numbers, they bear that out. Michigan was not as effective at running the football in 2023, the year they won the national championship, as they were in 2022. They dared J.J. McCarthy to throw. And you saw, week 1, 280 yards. You saw in week 2, 278 yards. Week 3, kind of a debacle. And then they started finding that balance a little bit more after that. So if I'm Michigan, I'm especially considering what you have done lately, considering that people are going to look at Justice Haynes, they're going to look at Jordan Marshall and see what he did against Alabama, the small openings he had in order to be able to get upfield. They're going to be like, okay, we are more comfortable at stopping the run, especially because despite Bryce Underwood's talent, assuming he is the starter, it's going to be like, well, he hasn't done it in games yet. Maybe we can confuse him on the back end. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to stop the run first before we stop the pass. So if I'm Michigan, I'm making those backers and those safeties back off a bit more early. And I think that with some of what you got from Semaj Morgan today indicates that that is certainly in the cards, because that's at least how he described it. Now, granted, that's a player versus a coach, but a coach is also likely to be a heck of a lot more guarded, right? Semaj is not going to give us coach speak. Now, that's just what he's seeing in practice. Like I said, we can go in and we can see something that is wildly different in games because it's all about the play calling at that point. But Chip Lindsey's record indicates that he wants a good balance. So you start throwing it, you start getting teams off kilter in the secondary, and then suddenly you're going to be able to start getting the ball going on the ground, and then maybe at that point things break open. But I think that you're not going to see a Michigan football get away from smash, right? Sharon Moore is not going to do the Ryan Day. Now, Ryan Day at least had set up things in his final year in Columbus as the offensive coordinator where they became a more dynamic passing attack. Because remember, under Urban Meyer, they were primarily running the football. Had really good quarterbacks, really good wide receivers, but that really took off with Dwayne Haskins in 2018, that they went towards the passing game. And they've just never really stopped at that point. So, but Sharon Moore, as an offensive lineman, I don't think that you're going to count on this idea of him basically suddenly saying, we're an air raid attack. Now, more fast-paced offense, I think that's interesting. I don't think that means tempo. I just think that means in terms of, essentially, and you're going to cringe at this, speed and space. I think that's going to be a part of it, because you're going to have a mixture of the possession receiver downfield with the idea of having your shifty players able to get other things going in terms of those intermediate or even short routes. And I think that's really interesting. With that in mind, let's keep on with the passing game because there's a couple other little tidbits that I think are interesting. We will get to those here in just a moment. Lo-fi show in the car, even got the sunglasses on, all of that stuff, almost home actually, but figured this was the best way to kind of get everything done, because otherwise I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to get a show in today when we are in a situation where I am stuck on the expressway and with just enough time left? I improvised, I adapted. And here we are, as we're getting into Fenton here. Anyway, I think there's a lot of interesting things that came out of today's press conference. Primarily, I think the passing game, obviously, is the part that makes you kind of go, Now, again, do I think that Michigan's gonna become like this shred offense? No. Would I anticipate Bryce Underwood breaking the 3,331 yard passing record? Again, no. Unless Michigan plays 16 games, then maybe. But I do think that unlike last year, or even I think you're going to get back a little bit more to that 230 to 209, maybe 300 yards, but you're going to see between 230 and 300 yards passing a game. Semaj talked a bit about him trying to become more explosive, said he didn't really know how to run correctly before this year, and now he's training with some track coaches and working on his explosiveness. That's very welcome, considering I'd heard talking to some people who would know that he maybe isn't as fast as some people would like to advertise him as. Hence me kind of putting Anthony Simpson in that role, maybe above him. But he's worked on it. He says this form, his technique, and just building out that muscle base to be able to be more explosive and be able to run more effectively and be faster and all of those things. And he says that really has been the case. I think that is that's interesting if that in fact worked. Again, we talked the other day about just general depth in the wide receiver room and the way they're talking about it. Now, again, I want you to take all of this with a grain of salt, because they talked about the offense in a lot of similar ways in fall camp last year. Not necessarily spring ball, right? They knew what we were going to see with their eyes, but they talked about it in fall camp for sure. However, the name that just keeps coming up, like asked about who's going to be surprising people and who's really standing out in that wide receiver room, Donaven McCulley was the first name out of Semaj Morgan's mouth. It continues to be that Donaven McCulley just sounds like he's just out there making plays. He's bringing a veteran leadership. Freaky, we keep on hearing about his ability as far as that's concerned. I just think that there's just a lot of smoke there. And obviously, they brought him in as a transfer. He's had a highly productive season, leading Indiana 2 years ago in receiving. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Donaven McCulley is able to do as far as that's concerned. But I'm equally interested in Hogan Hansen, who, finally got his first real taste of college football last year. Statistically, I'd have to look at it, and this is one of the things, if I was sitting at my computer, I might look at and just compare and contrast Hogan Hansen with Colston Loveland. Because remember, Colston Loveland didn't really come on until kind of late, right? Like he came on, but he came on like those last few games. Hogan, we got some early looks. I think it was the Arkansas State game. He had his first career and only touchdown. But he's got that kind of body type. He looks the part of being the type of guy that as a tight end can really stretch the field. But I think what makes it all interesting is if you put all of this together as kind of an amalgamation, right? You have wide receivers who are actually stepping up. You have downfield threats. You have intermediate threats. You have guys who are maybe more closer to the line of scrimmage, whether that's a Semaj Morgan or that's one of the running backs, them being able to threaten everything in terms of different levels. And then, you have the tight ends clearing out the middle. I think it just presents a lot of different opportunities. And considering you've got a guy like Bryce who is going to be a lot more accurate, more mature, as Semaj mentioned, like you can see the maturity from the point when Bryce was playing with him in high school as in the 7-on-7 circuit. Like, just all of that together, it tells me that we might be surprised, right? Again, Semaj Morgan says this is not your traditional Michigan offense. He's the one out of anyone. He's not Semaj Morgan, I think we all know, is not exactly one to give political answers when it comes to press conference questions. There's a reason why I constantly advocate for the idea of Semaj Morgan having a camera following him around at all times. Number one, he is incredibly entertaining, but he's going to tell it like it is. So, very, very interesting. All right. A little bit shorter show, in large part because I'm also pulling into my house here momentarily. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next week. Peace.